A free trade area is the region encompassing a trade bloc whose member countries have signed a free trade agreement. Such agreements involve cooperation between at least two countries to reduce trade barriers, import quotas and tariffs, and to increase trade of goods and services with each other. If natural persons are also free to move between the countries, in addition to a free trade agreement, it would also be considered an open border. It can be considered the second stage of economic integration. It is important to note the difference between customs unions and free trade areas. Both types of trading blocs are related to internal arrangements which parties conclude in order to liberalize and facilitate trade among themselves. The crucial difference between customs unions and free trade areas is their approach to third parties. While a customs union requires all parties to establish and maintain identical external tariffs, with regard to trade with non-parties, parties to a free trade area are not subject to such requirement. Instead, they may establish and maintain whatever tariff regime applying to imports from non-parties as deemed necessary. In a free trade area without harmonized external tariffs, to eliminate the risk of trade deflection, parties will adopt a system of preferential rules of origin. Regarding the term free trade area, it is originally meant by the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade to include only trade in goods. An agreement with a similar purpose, i.e., to enhance liberalization of trade in services, is named under Article 5 of the General Agreement on Trade and Service as an economic integration agreement. However, in practice, the term is now widely used to refer to agreements covering not only goods but also services and even investment. The formation of free trade areas is considered an exception to the most favored nation principle in the World Trade Organization because the preferences that parties to a free trade area exclusively grant each other go beyond their accession commitments. Although Article 24 of the GATT allows WTO members to establish free trade areas or to adopt interim agreements necessary for the establishment thereof, there are several conditions with respect to free trade areas or interim agreements leading to the formation of free trade areas. Firstly, duties and other regulations maintained in each of the signatory parties to a free trade area, which are applicable at the time such free trade area is formed, to the trade with non-parties to such free trade area shall not be higher or more restrictive than the corresponding duties and other regulations existing in the same signatory parties prior to the formation of the free trade area. In other words, the establishment of a free trade area to grant preferential treatment among its members is legitimate under WTO law, but the parties to a free trade area are not permitted to treat non-parties less favorably than before the area is established. A second requirement stipulated by Article 24 is that tariffs and other barriers to trade must be eliminated to substantially all the trade within the free trade area. Free trade agreements forming free trade areas generally lie outside the realm of the multilateral trading system. However, WTO members must notify to the Secretariat when they conclude new free trade agreements, and in principle the texts of free trade agreements are subject to review under the Committee on Regional Trade Agreements. Although a dispute arising within free trade areas are not subject to litigation at the WTO's dispute settlement body, there is no guarantee that WTO panels will abide by them and decline to exercise jurisdiction in a given case. Trade diversion and trade creation in general. Trade diversion means that a free trade area would divert trade away from more efficient suppliers outside the area towards less efficient ones within the areas. Whereas, trade creation implies that a free trade area creates trade which may not have otherwise existed. In all cases, trade creation will raise a country's national welfare. Both trade creation and trade diversion are crucial effects found upon the establishment of a free trade area. Trade creation will cause consumption to shift from a high-cost producer to a low-cost one, and trade will thus expand. In contrast, trade diversion will lead to trade shifting from a lower-cost producer outside the area to a higher-cost one inside the area. Such a shift will not benefit consumers within the free trade area as they are deprived the opportunity to purchase cheaper imported goods. However, economists find that trade diversion does not always harm aggregate national welfare. It can even improve aggregate national welfare if the volume of diverted trade is small. Free trade areas. As public goods economists have made attempts to evaluate the extent to which free trade areas can be considered public goods. They firstly address one key